Commander Marcus Rain stood at the observation deck of the galactic cruiser Resolute, his eyes locked on the incoming alien warship. The stars around them flickered cold and distant, indifferent to the battle that was about to unfold. Marcus clenched his jaw, swallowing the familiar knot of tension that coiled in his gut. Another fight, more lives lost, but duty always came first. "Sir, the Arcanian ship is within range," reported his first officer, Lieutenant Jun, from the tactical console. "Shields are up, weapons primed." Marcus nodded, his gaze never leaving the sleek, dangerous lines of the enemy craft. "Open a channel. One last chance to negotiate." Jun's fingers danced across the control panel. After a moment, he shook his head. "No response, Commander." Marcus exhaled, his voice hardening. "Very well. Prepare boarding parties. We take the ship." The bridge sprang into organized chaos as the crew scrambled to carry out his orders. Marcus allowed himself a fleeting, grim smile. His reputation as a ruthless leader was well known, but few understood the weight it placed on him. The sleepless nights, the faces of the fallen that haunted his dreams. There would be time to reflect later. Now, action was needed. "Boarding teams in position, Commander," Jun reported. Marcus gave a sharp nod. "Initiate docking." "And Jun," he added, his eyes hard, "no unnecessary bloodshed. We're soldiers, not butchers." "Aye, sir." The Resolute shuddered as it latched onto the Arcanian vessel. Marcus strode toward the airlock, his hand instinctively resting on his pulse rifle. He always led these missions himself. The moment the airlock hissed open, chaos erupted. Blaster fire crackled in the narrow corridors, filling the air with the smell of ozone and scorched metal. Marcus ducked behind a support beam, returning fire as one of the Arcanian soldiers fell, green blood splattering the walls. He pushed down a flicker of regret. There was no room for hesitation in war. His team advanced, cutting through the resistance, but the Arcanians fought fiercely, determined to hold their ground. As they neared the bridge, Marcus caught a blur of motion. A figure vaulted over a barricade, twin blades gleaming in the low light. His breath caught. She moved like a shadow, fluid and deadly. Her jade skin glistened with sweat, and her raven-black hair whipped around her face as she effortlessly cut down two of his men. Their eyes locked, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. Marcus knew who she was instantly. This was Ayara, the legendary Arcanian assassin he had heard whispers about. The moment shattered when a stray blast narrowly missed his head. He dove for cover, his pulse racing. When he looked again, Ayara had vanished. "Fall back," he ordered, signaling his team to regroup. "She's leading us into a trap." They retreated toward the airlock, Marcus's mind racing for a new strategy. Just then, Jun's voice crackled through the comms. "Commander, we're detecting a power surge in their core. I think." The ship rocked violently, throwing Marcus off balance. Alarms blared. "They're scuttling the ship," Marcus shouted, scrambling to his feet. "Everyone, back to the Resolute. Move!" The team raced for the airlock, the ship's deck shuddering beneath them. Marcus took the rear, ensuring his people made it through. Just as he was about to cross, a flash of movement caught his eye. Ayara was charging, her eyes full of determination, blades aimed directly at him. Time slowed. Marcus reached for his rifle, but he knew he wouldn't be fast enough. Just as she was about to strike, Ayara stumbled, her foot catching on debris. Marcus seized the opportunity, tackling her to the ground. They grappled, both fighting for control. Ayara was quick, but Marcus had the strength advantage. With a grunt, he pinned her, twisting her arms behind her back. "You're coming with me," he growled. She snarled but couldn't break free. Marcus hauled her to her feet and shoved her through the airlock just as the hatch sealed behind them. The Resolute broke away from the doomed Arcanian ship as it exploded in a brilliant burst of light. Breathing hard, Marcus leaned against the wall, his side aching where Ayara had landed a hit. He glanced over at her, now restrained and flanked by two security officers. Despite her captivity, her obsidian eyes remained locked on him, burning with both hatred and a flicker of something else. Curiosity, perhaps. "Take her to the brig," Marcus ordered. Maximum security protocols. As they led her away, Marcus allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction. The mission had been accomplished with minimal losses, and they had captured a high-value prisoner. Not a bad day's work. Hours later, Marcus stood outside the brig, mentally preparing himself. He had reviewed Solara's file in detail. Elite assassin, deadly in combat, responsible for the deaths of numerous Federation officers. And now, she was his prisoner. He nodded to the guards and entered. Solara sat on the narrow cot, her posture relaxed despite the force field containing her. Her eyes immediately fixed on him. Commander Marcus Rain, she purred, her voice silky and smooth. The infamous scourge of the Arcanians. I expected someone taller. Marcus's lips twitched despite himself. And I expected the legendary assassin to be quicker on her feet. Looks like we're both disappointed. Solara's eyes narrowed, but she quickly masked her irritation. It won't happen again. See that it doesn't, Marcus replied coolly. He pulled up a chair and sat just outside the force field. Let's talk. Why were you on that ship? It wasn't a military vessel. Solara smiled, her voice laced with sarcasm. A simple misunderstanding, Commander. I must have boarded the wrong ship. I was looking for a spa, I think. Cut the nonsense. Marcus's tone hardened. You're too important to waste on a mere trading vessel. What was your real mission? For a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, maybe respect, before her mask of indifference returned. My mission, Commander? She leaned forward, her voice barely a whisper. Was you? Marcus felt a chill run through him. He kept his expression neutral. Me? Solara's smile sharpened. Did you really think we'd let you continue unchecked forever? Marcus's jaw clenched. I gave the Arcanians every chance to surrender. Their blood is on their own hands. Keep telling yourself that, she spat. It helps you sleep at night, doesn't it? Marcus stood abruptly, his fists clenched. For a moment, fury boiled up inside him. But then he saw it. The tiniest flicker of fear in Solara's eyes. She was trying to provoke him. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to relax. Nice try, he said softly, leaning closer. But I'm at peace with who I am. Can you say the same? This time, the flash of emotion in Solara's eyes was unmistakable, doubt. Marcus pressed further. What's your real goal, Solara? What are you after? She stared at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. To end this war. The weight of her words hung between them. Marcus found himself leaning in, drawn by the unexpected honesty in her voice. How? He asked softly. Her gaze held his unwavering. By any means necessary. The intensity of her stare sent an unexpected shiver down his spine. He suddenly became acutely aware of how close they were, separated only by the force field. We'll continue this later, Marcus said, stepping back. Get some rest. As he turned to leave, her voice stopped him. Sweet dreams, Commander. I'll see you there. Marcus glanced back to see her lounging on the cot, a wicked smile playing at her lips. He shook his head, trying to ignore the way his pulse quickened. This woman was dangerous in more ways than one. Captain Darius Hale stood at the viewport of his private quarters aboard the Invictus, the stars outside seeming closer than ever. His reflection stared back at him, a man hardened by war and haunted by decisions that could never be undone. The memory of Ayara's blade at his throat still lingered, an unspoken connection forged in that moment of shared intensity. He'd captured her, yes, but the cost had been greater than anticipated. She was dangerous, unpredictable, and unsettlingly captivating. And now, with Ayara aboard his ship, nothing felt certain. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. He exhaled and called out, "Enter." The door slid open, revealing Commander Vance. The first officer stepped in, his face tight with concern. "Captain, I've just received a report from security. Ayara's been quiet, but there's something you should see." Darius frowned, pushing the unease down. "What is it, Commander?" Vance hesitated for a moment. "It's the brig cameras. Just come take a look." Minutes later, they stood in front of the security monitor in the command room. The footage from Ayara's cell played on a loop. Darius leaned forward, watching closely. She sat on the edge of her cot, seemingly calm, her black eyes occasionally flickering with something unreadable. But there was a pattern to her movements. Every few minutes, her fingers would trace strange shapes on the energy field holding her captive. "What's she doing?" Darius asked, brow furrowed. "We're not sure," Vance admitted. "We thought it was just nervous movement at first, but then we noticed the pattern. Same sequence, over and over." Darius felt a chill run down his spine. He studied the footage more closely. She wasn't just restless. This was deliberate. Have the techs analyzed this? Vance nodded grimly. "They're working on it now, but it's not any language or symbol we recognize. It might be Altari code or some form of visual communication." Darius straightened, his instincts humming. "She's sending a message." "It's possible," Vance said, lowering his voice. "Or she's preparing something. I'd recommend doubling security." "Do it," Darius ordered. "And make sure nothing gets through her cell. Not a single outgoing signal." Vance nodded, but his expression was still troubled. "Captain, with respect, why are we keeping her aboard? The crew's on edge, and the longer she stays, the more whispers I hear." Darius sighed. He understood the concerns. Ayara was a living weapon, one that, even locked away, posed a serious threat. But she also represented something more. The possibility of ending this war, of understanding the enemy in a way no one else could, and perhaps in a way he couldn't yet admit to himself. She fascinated him. "I know what the crew thinks, Vance," Darius said quietly. "But Ayara is valuable. More than that, she might be the key to a breakthrough we've been waiting for. I won't let fear dictate our actions." Vance regarded him for a long moment, then nodded. "Understood, Captain." As the commander left, Darius returned to the viewport, thoughts swirling. Ayara was playing a game, a dangerous one, and he needed to figure out the rules before it was too late. But there was something deeper, something far more personal about their exchanges. He couldn't shake the feeling that whatever her endgame, it wasn't just about the war anymore. Hours later, Darius made his way to the brig, the cold steel corridors of the Invictus feeling more oppressive than usual. He was there to confront her about the symbols the game she was playing. But as the doors to the brig slid open, the sight of her stopped him in his tracks. Ayara stood in her cell, her posture relaxed, hands tracing the energy field once again. The moment she saw him, her lips curved into a knowing smile. "Captain Hale," she purred, her voice soft but cutting through the silence like a knife. "I was wondering when you'd come back. Couldn't resist our little talks, could you?" Darius crossed his arms, keeping his expression neutral. "I'm not here for small talk, Ayara. What are you doing?" She tilted her head, eyes gleaming with amusement. "I thought that much was obvious. I'm passing the time. It's rather boring in here." "You're passing the time by writing messages on the force field?" Ayara's smile widened. "Messages? Oh no, Captain, you misunderstand me. I'm simply preparing." "Preparing for what?" Darius took a step closer, his tone sharp. "To end this," she replied, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Just like I told you, for a heartbeat." Her gaze locked onto his, intense and unyielding. Despite himself, Darius felt his pulse quicken. "I don't believe you," he said coldly, fighting the pull she seemed to have on him. "You're manipulating me, and I won't let it work." Her smile faded, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of something deeper in her eyes, something real. "Manipulation? Perhaps," she admitted. "But if you think I'm the only one playing games here, you're mistaken. We both know there's more at stake than just this war. More than just Altari and Federation politics." Darius frowned. "What are you talking about? You felt it, didn't you? In the training room, in the way we fight, the way we interact." Her voice lowered, growing more intimate. "We are the same, Captain. Warriors, bound by duty, haunted by what we've done. We could do more together than either of us can apart." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. For the first time, Darius wasn't sure what to say. His mind warred with itself, distrust, curiosity, attraction. What she was suggesting was dangerous, reckless. But a part of him, The part that had been drawn to her from the moment they locked eyes was listening. "Why should I trust you?" he asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Ayara's gaze softened, her usual sharpness giving way to something more vulnerable. "Because, Captain, I have no one else to trust, and neither do you." Darius stared at her, the silence between them charged with unspoken tension. He didn't know if he could believe her. He didn't know if she was telling the truth, or if this was just another one of her traps. But he did know one thing. Nothing would be the same after this. Commander Vance to Captain Hale. The comm in his ear suddenly buzzed, breaking the moment. Darius turned away from Ayara, steeling himself. "Go ahead, Commander." "Captain, we've picked up a distress signal," Vance reported. "It's a Federation ship. They're under attack." Darius glanced back at Ayara, who was watching him closely, her expression unreadable. "On my way," he said, his voice firm. He didn't know if he could trust her, but right now, there were more pressing matters. The war wasn't over, and lives still hung in the balance. As he left the brig, Ayara's voice echoed after him. "Be careful out there, Captain. The battlefield is full of surprises." He didn't respond, but her words lingered in his mind as he strode toward the bridge. Something was coming, something far bigger than he or Ayara could control, and he wasn't sure either of them were ready for it. Captain Darius Hale strode onto the bridge, his mind still reeling from the conversation with Ayara. But there was no time to dwell on it now. A distress signal from a Federation ship meant lives were at stake. His crew snapped to attention as he took his place in the captain's chair. "Status report," Darius ordered, his voice sharp. Commander Vance, standing by the tactical console, didn't miss a beat. "It's the Endeavor, sir. They're under heavy fire from an unidentified vessel. Long-range scans indicate Altari weapon signatures." Darius clenched his jaw. "The Altari again. Distance? 6 minutes at maximum warp. Helm, set course and engage. Full speed." The familiar hum of the engines increased as the Invictus surged forward, racing toward the coordinates of the beleaguered Federation ship. Darius' eyes flicked to the viewport, the stars streaking by in a blur of light. The tension on the bridge was palpable, but his crew was disciplined, experienced. They trusted him, and more importantly, they trusted each other. Yet his thoughts kept circling back to Ayara, her cryptic words in the brig, the intensity of her stare, the way she had so confidently spoken of ending the war. And then there was that unsettling sense of connection he couldn't shake, no matter how hard he tried. He could still feel the electric charge in the air when their eyes had met. She was dangerous, but there was something more beneath the surface, something that tugged at him in ways he couldn't understand. "Captain," Commander Vance interrupted his thoughts, "we're approaching the distress signal. Visual range in 30 seconds. Darius straightened in his chair, forcing himself to focus. "Bring us out of warp at a safe distance. Shields up, weapons primed." The Invictus dropped out of warp with a jarring lurch, and the view screen snapped to life, revealing a chaotic battlefield. The Endeavor, a medium-class Federation cruiser, was adrift, its shields flickering as a sleek Altari warship rained fire on its hull. Explosions rippled across the Endeavor's surface, debris floating in the cold void. "Open a channel to the Endeavor," Darius ordered, his voice tight. No response, Vance said, after a moment of tense silence. "Their communications array must be down." "Damn it," Darius muttered. "Target the Altari ship. Disable their engines and weapons. We don't need to destroy them. Just get them off the Endeavor." "Aye, Captain," the tactical officer acknowledged, fingers flying over the console. Firing in 3, 2, 1. The Invictus shuddered as its main phaser banks unleashed a barrage of energy, striking the Altari warship dead on. The enemy vessel's shields flared, absorbing the hits, but then a secondary volley found its mark. The Altari ship veered off course, its engines sputtering. "They're retreating," Vance called out, a hint of relief in his voice. "Let them go," Darius said. "We need to tend to the Endeavor." "Captain," came the voice of Lieutenant Nyla from the science station. "I'm reading multiple life signs aboard the Endeavor, but their power systems are failing. They'll lose life support in minutes." "Prepare a rescue team," Darius commanded. I want medics and engineers. Get over there and stabilize that ship." Vance nodded and tapped his comms, organizing the away team. Darius exhaled, glancing at the tactical display on the console beside him. The Endeavor had taken a beating, but they could still save it. His gaze drifted back to the starfield outside, his thoughts once again drifting to Ayara. There was something about this attack that didn't sit right with him. Why would a single Altari vessel target a Federation cruiser in the middle of neutral space? And why leave so suddenly? "Captain," Nyla said suddenly, her voice laced with alarm. "I'm detecting a second surge in the area, large power signatures incoming." Darius' eyes snapped to the view screen just as it flickered. His heart skipped a beat as 3 massive Altari warships blinked into view, their sleek, predatory shapes cutting through the darkness like knives. "Shields to maximum," Darius barked, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair. "Red alert!" The bridge lights dimmed, bathing the room in an ominous red glow as klaxons blared. The Altari ships immediately opened fire, their energy weapons slamming into the Invictus with brutal force. The ship rocked violently, consoles sparking as the crew struggled to maintain control. "Shields at 70%. Vance shouted over the din, "We can't take much more of this." Darius gritted his teeth. It was an ambush. They'd fallen right into it. Evasive maneuvers. Return fire. Target their lead ship. The Invictus danced through space, dodging some of the incoming fire but taking direct hits all the same. Darius felt the ship shudder beneath him as his tactical officer fired back, the Invictus's phasers and torpedoes lashing out at the Altari vessels. The enemy's shields held strong, but the lead ship took a hard hit, listing to one side. "They're trying to flank us," Vance warned, his voice tight with urgency. Darius's mind raced. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and the Endeavor was still vulnerable. They needed a way out, but running wouldn't guarantee survival. His crew was looking to him for answers, and the weight of command pressed down harder than ever. Suddenly, the bridge comm system crackled to life. A voice, smooth, composed, and unsettlingly familiar, filled the room. "Captain Hale, I believe I can be of assistance." Darius froze. It was Ayara. Her voice drifted through the ship, calm amidst the chaos. "What the hell is this?" Vance snapped, his hand hovering over his weapon as though he could shoot through the comms. Darius narrowed his eyes. "Ayara, this is neither the time nor the place." "What are you playing at?" "Captain," Ayara continued, unbothered by his frustration. "I know the Altari. I know their tactics, their ships. If you want to survive this encounter, you'll need me. I can guide you through their formations, expose their weaknesses." Darius hesitated, the fire of the battle raging around him. It felt like a trap, another one of her games. But what choice did he have? They were pinned down, and they wouldn't last long against 3 warships. "Captain," Vance urged, "you can't seriously be considering this. We can't trust her." Darius locked eyes with his first officer. "Do you have a better idea?" Vance faltered, his jaw tight. "No, sir." Darius turned back to the console. "Fine, Ayara. What's your plan?" There was a beat of silence before she replied, her voice laced with confidence. "You'll need to adjust your shield harmonics to frequency 342. It will counter their energy weapons for a short time. Then, use a narrow phaser burst to overload the lead ship's power core. It'll create a chain reaction that should take the others out." Darius stared at the console, considering the risk. But they had no better options. "Do it," he ordered, his voice steady. The crew moved quickly, adjusting the shields as Ayara had instructed. The ship rocked again as another blast hit, but this time, the shields held firm. "It's working," Nyla shouted from her station. "Fire," Darius commanded. The tactical officer unleashed a precise phaser burst, striking the lead Altari ship in a weak spot near the engines. The ship wavered for a moment before a bright flash of light erupted from its core. A split second later, a chain reaction tore through the other 2 warships, consuming them in a massive explosion. The bridge went silent, the only sound the soft hum of the Invictus's engines. Darius leaned back in his chair, exhaling a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. They'd done it. They'd survived. Status report? He asked, his voice low. Shields at 30%, but holding, Vance replied. Minimal damage to the hull. We're safe for now. Darius nodded, his gaze shifting back to the comms console. Ayara, he said slowly. I'm not sure if I should thank you or be more suspicious than ever. Her voice came through softly, almost teasing. Why not both, Captain? After all, we make quite the team. Darius stared at the viewport, the smoldering wreckage of the Altari ships floating in the distance. This war had just taken a new turn, and Ayara was right at the center of it. He wasn't sure what game she was playing, but one thing was clear. It had only just begun.